This lesson is on algebra properties. So I'm going to first teach you about 4 properties that we need to memorize and understand. The first property is called the distributive property. So if you look at this, for this example, it's saying 5 times the quantity of 3 plus 4 is the same as or equals 5 times 3 plus 5 times 4. So what this is really saying is we're just distributing this 5 to the 3 and this 5 to the 4. So 5 times 3, and then I'm including the equal sign, or I'm sorry, including the plus sign, 5 times 4 here. Okay, so this is using the distributive property that tells us that we can multiply the number outside of the parentheses to both items that's inside the parentheses. The next property is called the commutative property. This property just means that we're flip-flopping the numbers. So 5 plus 3 equals 3 plus 5. Well, 5 plus 3 is 8. 3 plus 5 is 8. Okay, that makes sense. 8 equals 8. Same thing with multiplication. 5 times 3 equals 3 times 5. Well, 15 equals 15, so that works. So commutative property, just flip-flopping the numbers. The next property is called the associative property. With this property, I always say it's kind of moving the parentheses around. So if you look at this one, it's saying the quantity of 2 plus 3, or 2 plus 3 in parentheses, plus 4, is the same thing or equals 2 plus the quantity of 3 plus 4, or 3 plus 4 is in parentheses. Notice how the parentheses started at 2 plus 3 here, and then they moved to 3 plus 4 here. The order of the numbers are still the same. It goes 2, 3, and 4, 2, 3, and 4, but the parentheses just hopped. Same thing with multiplication. Notice the parentheses started here, and then the parentheses hopped over one spot, and they're now at the end. So the associative property can be used for addition and multiplication, just like the commutative property was, but it just refers to the parentheses moving. The last property we need to understand is called the identity property. And this property just says that a number plus 0 is that number, or a number times 1 is that number. So for example, 5 plus 0 equals 5, and 5 times 1 equals 5. So the identity property just says a number that's added to 0 is that number. It keeps its identity, or that a number multiplied by 1 is that number. It keeps its identity. So an example of how we're going to use these properties in a problem, I'm going to ask you to name the property. So let's look at number 1. It says 9 times 1 equals 9. What property says that any number times 1 equals 9? Well, if we look back to the identity property, this is an example where it said any number times 1 is going to be that number. So this is called the identity property. So let's look at the next one. 6 times 3 times 2, or there are 3 times 2 in parentheses, is the same thing as 6 times 3 plus 6 times 2. Well, looks like that 6 is being distributed here. So if we look back, that distributive property told us that and the number outside the parentheses can be distributed and multiplied, and the numbers can be added together. So I can call this the distributive property. I'll just put DIST for short. Number 3, 9 times 5, the quantity of 9 times 5 times 2 equals 9 times 5 times 2. Well, it looks to me like the parentheses are just changing spots. The numbers are staying in the same order. The parentheses are just changing spots. So if we look back, the associative property tells us that our parentheses just move. So we can call this the associative property. Now let's look at the last one. 7 times 3 equals 3 times 7. Well, let's look at our commutative property. Our commutative property states that the numbers just flip-flop. So we can go back, and it looks like 7 times 3 equals 3 times 7. The numbers are just flip-flopping. So we can say that's the commutative property. Oh, and that brings us to the end of the lesson. So again, we just have to remember the properties of algebra that we need to know in 6th grade. The first one is distributive. The second one is commutative. The third one is associative. And the last one is identity.